Madhav, you want to try something over here? What is compiler language and what is interpreter? Richard, you want to try? Hello? Fine. So what happened? Compiler, if
Sorry, I had my
suppose,
mic muted.
you want to try something, you can try. What you understood by compiler and what you understood by interpreter.
Um, Compiler, that's like C, C++, COBOL,
Yeah,
some older programming languages, right?
yeah.
And an interpreter, is that going to be more like Python? Is that an interpreter language?
Yeah, it's an interpreter language. But what is the differentiate? How you can differentiate between a compiler and an interpreter? What is the different? How it is getting different from it?
I don't know.
I'll be explaining. No need to worry. Okay, fine. So there I am writing my code. Okay, a program I am writing where what happened? There is a code line 1. Okay, there's a code line 2. Okay, there's a code line 3. Good enough. 3 lines of a code I have written in my programming language. Okay, good. Now what is happening is that same 3 line of a code. This is interpreter way of dealing. Okay, this is compiler way of dealing. Okay, I'll be explaining what is the exact difference between them. Okay, now I'm writing code line 1, code line 2, code line 3. Good enough. Now what happened is that suppose in my second line there's an error in my code. Okay, there's an error in my second line. This compiler or interpreter, what they do it, they just they run the program what we are writing, and they are suggesting us where's a program where is an error and what is the error, like that. Okay, so that we can solve our error and we can proceed it. I'll show what is the difference between that. I'll let you know. So same line of a code I am running through my compiler. Okay, same line of a code I am running through my interpreter. Okay, Madhav, you want to try with this compiler interpreter? What's the difference?
Hi. Sorry, I reconnected.
Yeah, I got it. I have seen it. But like you can try. You want to try what is compiler, what is interpreter, how it is getting differentiated? Good enough. Okay, no problem. So what happened is that there are 3 lines of a code I have written: code line 1, code line 2, code line 3, in same line
Okay.
of a code in compiler as well as in interpreter. So what happened is that, but I know that there is an error is there in my code line 2. Okay, there's an error in code line 2. I know very well there's an error. So this code, when I run it through my compiler way of dealing it, what will happen at last it will run code line 1, good enough, code line 2, good enough. Even there is an error in code line 2, code line 3, good enough. All the 3 lines it will run, and at last it will give me a message, and at last it will give me a message that you have error in code line 2. Please solve code line 2 error. It will give me, after reading how many lines? After reading code line 1, code line 2, code line 3. Good enough? In after reading code line 1, code line 2, code line 3. All the 3 lines will be read, and then it will give me a message at last that you have a error in code line 2. Please solve that error. Whereas same code, when I'm running through my interpreter, what it will do, it will read code line 1, no error is there, so it will proceed to code line 2. It will read code line 2, and I know there is an error in code line 2. So at this moment only, code line 2, okay, at this moment only, at code line 2 only, it will display a message saying that please solve code line 2 error, then only I will read code line 3. So understood what is the difference? First, whereas in the case of a compiler, what happened? It has read code line 1, it has read code line 2, it has read code line 3, and at last it is giving me an error that you have giving a message that you have an error in code line 2. Please solve that error. Whereas in the case of an interpreter, what happened is that it has read code line 1, it has no error is there, so proceeding to the next line. It has read code line 2, and he got an error over there. The moment he got an error at this particular time, the interpreter stop at that particular time only, and it is saying please solve this error. After you solve this particular error, then only I will be reading code line 3. Okay, so in interpreter, until unless your line of a code is solved or free of error, it won't read the next line. Understood? You have to solve this particular line of a code in without free of error. There won't be any error, then only it will go to next line. Whereas in the case of compiler, it will read all the lines, and at last it will mention these many lines have an error. Understood, Richard?
Yes, understood.
Can you explain me what's the difference between compiler and interpreter?
The way that it processes its validation. If it goes through and tries to validate the compiler, then and it errors out, it'll read all the lines available to it and tell you where the errors are. Where an interpreter language will start processing the validation, and then when it hits an error, it will stop reading and say, hey, you have an error in this case in line 2, fix that, and then I'll have me reprocess everything.
Yes, very good. Excellent. Okay, fine, good. So that's the difference between and in Python is what? It's an interpreter language. Okay, as like Perl and PHP, those are also interpreter language. They will read line by line, and until unless your first or the current line is free of error, it won't go to the next line. Good enough. So Python is